Good afternoon, everybody. Getting close to evening. Thank you so much for joining us for our author, Peter Young, author of The Blue Team. We are very excited to have him this evening. We'll be recording his performance, so if you want to review it later, we'll have it on YouTube, and it will air on Channel 7. So again, thank you for joining us. If you would, give a warm Billings welcome to author Peter Young.
I appreciate it. I've met our whole audience, so we will just get underway. And I also know two of my audience members quite well. So again, thanks for coming out on this beautiful Friday night. What I really want to do is tell you about a story, which are multiple stories. I love the power of stories. I love to read them. I love to write them. I love to watch a good story on a movie. When my children, I have 5 by the way, but when my boys and my 2 daughters were younger, they would always ask me to tell a story. And stories are how we communicate. It's how we convey a message or important ideas. In the Bible, Christ talked in stories. He called them parables, but they were little stories, and he used agriculture to get his point across. I think mostly because that's what his audience knew and understood. And I love using sports as a metaphor for life. I have played and coached and been a sports broadcaster for over 20 years, so that's kind of what I know about. So what the overarching story for tonight is, it's the story of how I learned through a life of sports that our true adversary, our greatest adversary, is not the guy trying to block your shot, or it's not the teammate who won't pass you the ball, and it's not the coach who won't start you, but it's our own mind. And so I want to start with the story of The Blue Team. So it's my first novel, and many years ago it started, actually about 1990. And it started out not as a novel, but as a nonfiction, and it was kind of the life of the anonymous Division I basketball player. So that would be me. So the anonymous Division I basketball player, and these are actually 2 teams I played against. I played against George Washington University. So this is UMass and St. Joe's. But the anonymous guy is not that guy. This is me, okay? That was me. I was the guy getting dunked on, not the guy doing the dunking. So as I'm working on this book in the early 90s, I thought, well, other than my teammates who are going to get a kick and a laugh out of these anecdotal stories, who's going to really read my book? Who's going to really enjoy it? What kind of an impact is it going to have? So I changed it from nonfiction to a novel. And I would work on it for a couple weeks, put it down, pick it up, put it down. This continued for many years. I sent it to people and got the proverbial don't quit your day job, because at the time it really wasn't very good. So then I became a sports broadcaster full-time in mid to late 90s, and I was very fortunate to work with a brilliant storyteller. A man's name is Rick LaCivita. He was a producer for CBS and ABC, and he worked on the Olympics, World Series, Monday Night Football, worked with Howard Cosell, if you remember that name. Again, a brilliant guy, great storyteller. And I was fortunate to work with Rick for many years. And so I sent him an early manuscript, and he read it, and he said, Peter, and he was kind, he said, every great story is about more than just plot and characters. And I knew I had great characters. I always did. He said, every great story is going to try and say something deeper. It's about love or marriage or revenge, patriotism, family, what have you. And then he asked me, and he said, well, what is your story about? And I didn't know. I didn't have an answer. So I put it down again for a while. But then as I matured as a man, as a father, the story kind of started to develop, but I knew what I wanted to say as I learned the lessons in my life. And so again, the overarching story for tonight is that the Blue Team can really convey this message in 3 key principles. So the first one is, do you play for the love of the game or for the love of praise? And again, instead of just basketball, this can be also applicable to the butcher, the baker, and the banker, right? I love using sports as a metaphor for life. I believe it can really explain principles that are very broad. So when we first start playing sports, we play sports, right? We don't work sports. But what motivates you when it becomes hard, when it becomes like work, when you go to, let's say, play for your high school team or in college, when you have to get up early at 5:30 or 6 and go run and go lift weights, or when you have to go practice for 3 hours and you're sore and you just don't want to. What motivates you then? Is it because you're looking for that ego stroke, someone to notice you, or because you love the game? So the best story to illustrate this point are these 3 lovely ladies. These are the O'Reilly triplets. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but they're identical triplets. They dominated the junior circuit back in the 1980s, all went to Duke University. They all played at Duke. In fact, the tennis courts at Duke are named after the O'Reilly triplets. And then they all had a brief pro career as well. They also happened to grow up right down the street from me in good old Ridgewood, New Jersey. So this is Patty, Christine, and Terry. Or Terry, Christine, and Patty. I literally, my entire life, I went to kindergarten through high school with them, could not tell them apart. So one day, though, in high school, I'm in the library and I'm pretending to study, and I think it was Christine, came up and we talked for a bit, and then she had to go to class, so she left. So my buddy says, "Do you know what happened to her this weekend?" I said, "No." And he said, "Well, she just beat like the top-ranked junior at a tournament down in Florida, and she never said a word about it, and none of them did." And when I was in high school, I was very immature. I needed that praise. I needed the ego stroke. I wanted people to say how good I was because I was, again, not a very mature person. And yes, the O'Reilly triplets were incredibly gifted, incredibly talented, incredibly driven, but they played because they loved the game. They didn't need the praise. They played because they loved it. And the key point here is when you love, you can give. When you need something, you take. So apply that to being a teammate or being a coworker. That if you're always needing, you're taking, you're not being able to give. And so in the book, The Blue Team, the main character's name is Thomas Connor. And he's a really good shooter. And but he really struggles with this point. Why am I playing the game? Why do I work so hard at basketball? Is it because I need something from it or because I love the game? So I enjoyed, and the book has got a lot of autobiographical parts to it. I always tell people that it's a novel because in college I stunk and our team stunk. But Thomas and GW in the book are very good, so that's where it becomes a novel. But I really enjoyed writing the portions of the book that really applied to me, and Thomas and I are like, he's my alter ego, where we'd be in the gym by ourselves alone. So I'm just gonna read you. It's early on. And just like Thomas, you know, you'd have a tough game, a tough day, maybe a bad test, who knows what it is. And for some people, they might go eat, they might go drink, they might go who knows where. They might go talk to their friend. I would go to the gym all the time. And so Thomas is alone in the gym by himself, and he always made sure he knew the guy with the keys in the gym. So even with the gym closed at like 10 o'clock, he could get in there at 10:30 and shoot till midnight if he wanted to. So here we go. He's in the gym, and he's just turned on the lights. Rubbing my hands over the contours of the ball always triggered a Pavlovian surge of warmth into each finger. The first bouncing of the ball echoed loudly, shattering the silence. Uncomfortable at first, like a loud alarm clock, soon the echoing sound of the bouncing ball created a welcome rhythm. Both the gym and I craved it. The sound of the ball swishing through the net was the exclamation point. Shooting was my therapy, my meditation. Alone in the gym, distractions faded, and my thoughts became clear. It had always been this way for me. I would shoot and shoot until I slowly entered a trance. It was my most comfortable state of being. It was where troubles became less significant with each made shot. No matter what happened in my life, on or off the court, I could shoot the basketball. And I remember as a kid, actually, when my dog Agan died, I was in high school. I went to go shoot. That was always my therapy. That's what I would go do. And so if the praise and the adulation and the attention that you are seeking is the driving force, then you might also become susceptible to the second principle that I really try and get across in my book, which is this. Don't try and be someone else. Be yourself. Okay, so you remember this guy, Larry Bird, right? So I grew up in the 80s. I was a big Boston Celtics fan and a Larry Bird fan. And I was going to be the next Larry Bird. And since you've just met me tonight, I had no idea who I am. You know that never happened, right? So I was not very good. I did not become the next Larry Bird. But here's the irony. Do you remember this man, Red Auerbach? So Red was the great Boston Celtics coach and then the general manager. He was the guy that craftily, very crafty, drafted Bird when he had an extra year of eligibility to Indiana State. Took a huge risk, but still signed him, changed the franchise's fortunes for the next decade. Red Auerbach also played basketball like in the 1940s at George Washington University, which is where I played. So all those years when Red was up in Boston as a coach and general manager, he kept a house in the DC area. And so he would commute back and forth. So every year he would come to like a game or two or a practice or two, and he'd watch and he'd kind of come out and maybe say something to the coach of the team. So there I am as a freshman, and again, this is me, not Thomas Connor in the book, and I'd never met him. And I go downstairs to where the locker rooms are to get ready for practice. And there's my coach and Red Auerbach. They just got done playing racquetball. And I'm stunned. My jaw drops. It's Red Auerbach, the great Red Auerbach. And my coach says, Peter, this is Red Auerbach. Red, this is Peter Young, one of our freshmen. And Red doesn't say, hi, how are you? Nice to meet you. He's just got this gravelly voice because he's always got a cigarette in his mouth. He says, hi, Young, you can shoot, but you can't do nothing else. It's the only conversation I ever had with Red Auerbach. He didn't say anything else to me. And unfortunately, he was right. That's the only thing I could do was shoot. So I didn't become the next Larry Bird. So then, when I got done playing, I was going to be this guy, the next John Wooden. Wonderful man. Remember, great Christian man. Talked about the pyramid of success, which I'm going to talk on later. Won 10 national championships in 12 years for UCLA. An incredible coach and an incredible man, really. So I got done playing. I got into coaching. And I was so arrogant. And boy, the Lord really needed to get my attention. And he did. So I'm coaching high school basketball in Golden, Colorado. And I'm the JV head coach. I'm not even the varsity head coach. And I've got my suit on, and I'm taking it so seriously. And it's a close game. I've already got one technical foul. So it's late in the game. And the other team has the ball, and we're up 1. And there's just a few seconds left. This kid makes a shot. The other team goes up 1. And so I'm immediately trying to call timeout. And there's like a second or 2 left. 2, 1, buzzer sounds. And the refs ignored me. The other team's walking off the court, they're celebrating. So I walk onto the court and say, how come you need to give my how come you need to give you my timeout? And the one ref who just had enough of me puts his whistle in my mouth, and he tees me up, gives me a technical foul after the game had ended. The other team was off the court. He had one of the kids go to the free throw line and shoot the free throw just to rub it in, even though I'd already won the game. So that was the end of my coaching career. So I did not become the next John Wooden. So I got into TV, and this is mid-'90s, and I was going to be the next Bob Costas. You know who Bob Costas is? And again, you've never heard me before, so you know I didn't become the next Bob Costas. But I did have a nice broadcasting career. That's Thurl Bailey, who played for North Carolina State in college when they won the national championship in 1983, and then played for the Utah Jazz. I got to do some D-League games, or the NBA minor leagues. Traveled the world, traveled the country for about 20 years, met a lot of great people. That's where I also met Rick LaCivita, my mentor. But really, look at this young kid without any gray hair. My 15 seconds of fame was a blooper. So my first full-time job in TV was in Idaho Falls, Pocatello, Idaho. And I was the weekend anchor, weekday reporter. And we were an ABC affiliate at the time. I think I'm 27 at the time. So it's like Christmas or New Year's Eve, somewhere around there. And it's Idaho. It's dark. It's cold outside. We've been there all day. It's probably 10:30 at night. We're all ready to go home or go hang out. Who's watching anyway, right? And I would come on the set after the weather. And at our studio, usually the male anchor would toss to sports, the female tosses the weather. But our station was switched. So I come on the set, and we're all giddy, and the female anchor, who would not know a basketball from a football if her life depended on it, says, what should I lead you? Because, you know, here comes Peter, and boy, what a great game. Larry Bird playing the Boston Celtics. Yes, Nydia, thank you. And then I would go on. So she says, what should I say? And somebody makes a joke. Say this. And everybody laughs, and the cameramen are laughing. Somebody else says, say this. 5 seconds to air. Boom, we're live. It's live TV. Live is live. And Nydia could have said, doesn't matter. And she said something like big bowl game. And we just started laughing. And I'm laughing, and she's laughing. You know when you're not supposed to laugh, you can't stop. So I'm on live TV, and I got nowhere to hide. So I just started laughing. And I finally get through it. Well, Oprah was kind of the ratings, beast in the 90s. And so her producers asked all of the ABC affiliates around the country to send in their great bloopers because she was doing a show on laughter. My blooper made the Oprah show. So that was my 15 seconds of fame. So needless to say, I did not become any of those things. And now that I have written a novel, I'm not trying to be the next John Grisham. I'm not trying to be the next John Steinbeck or Louis L'Amour. I'm just trying to be the best me. And that's really the key of this principle. The world doesn't need the next anybody. It needs the first and best you and me. That's why the Lord created you and me. What I am and what I do are different. And instead of trying to wrap my identity and trying to be the next somebody else, Larry Bird or Bob Costas or John Wooden, what I am is a Christian. I'm a believer. What I do is I tell stories. I like to write. And it's important to separate the two. For me, I put my identity in Christ. I no longer put my identity in what I try and accomplish. And so the first line in this book, again, Thomas Connor struggles with the same thing I do. But the first line and the last line are very similar. I tried to put a button on things. First line, I wanted to be the next Larry Bird. He was the greatest basketball player in the world, and I was going to be just like him. And that was me when I was in high school. And then the last line of the book, and I can read this because I'm not going to give anything away, but Thomas goes through a lot, and he does learn his lessons. And I wish I had learned my lesson when I was in my teenage years. I probably learned it in my 40s, and I'm still learning. So he's shooting hoops with his buddy Ray. And Ray is a great character in his book. I do hope you read it. Ray is almost true to life, more so than any character in this book. Just as an aside, I met Ray at a prison. I was not in prison. In the 1980s, I was playing for Athletes in Action, which is a Christian team that travels around the world. And at halftime, you get a captive audience. You share the gospel. And so we played a exhibition game at a prison in Colorado. Ray saw that I was from New Jersey. He was from New Jersey. Struck up a friendship. We were pen pals for a couple years. And then when Ray got out of prison, he was paroled early. He came to live with me for a few months. And I've lost track of Ray. I have not seen him in probably 28, 29 years. And it was my hope that one day he would find this book and pick it up, and and he'll read it. He'll know it's him, and he would get back in touch with me. And I don't even know if Ray's still alive anymore. But anyway, so he and Ray are shooting, and Thomas makes another jump shot, and Ray says, "Swish, man, Connor, you can shoot just like Larry Bird." And Thomas says, "Larry Bird, hardly. I'll tell you one thing, though. It's a beautiful thing shooting a basketball. It's a beautiful thing." So Thomas comes full circle in the book. He's learned his lesson. And so really, the final principle that puts them all together is that, trying to be somebody else, like a Larry Bird, is not trying to just mimic somebody's jump shot or to be the next Tiger Woods, trying to mimic somebody's golf swing or whatever it is. It's really an attribute of the mind. It's a goal of the mind. And this is really the most important point I want to get across in my book. Where the game is truly played, it's in our mind. You've heard great athletes talk about it. We are our own worst enemy. And so think about it this way. If you golf and you're on the putting green and you got your favorite putter in your hand and you got a little white ball and you're just putting 10 feet away, ball after ball after ball. No big deal, right? Well, now imagine same favorite putter, same little white ball, and you're on the 18th green of the Masters. You got a one-shot lead, and Tiger Woods is in second place. And there's 1 million people watching, there's $1 million on the line, and if you're a golfer, your palms are sweating right now, just thinking about it. What's the difference? It's right here. It's all in your mind. The associated doubt you bring to that moment or the confidence you bring to that moment. And so the best way to describe this and illustrate it through a story is this guy. This is Alex Honnold. Now, if you've never heard of him, but they made a movie about him called Free Solo. Alex is climbing El Capitan. El Capitan is the most epic rock wall in the world. Kathleen, you're nodding because you've heard of this story. It's about 3,000 feet straight up. And Alex, as you can see, is climbing this without any rope or harness or nothing. The moment he was 60 to 80 feet off the deck, he was risking his life. Those little green things that look like shrubs are probably huge evergreens. And he survived. And I watched the movie twice, and both times my palms were sweating when I watched it, even though I knew the outcome. But the key point here is, and I don't know if Alex is a man of faith or not, but he had climbed El Capitan probably, I think, 50 times before this moment. But he'd always climbed it with protection, with gear, with somebody belaying him so that if he fell, he was protected. But that day, Alex, when he climbed this, he didn't conquer El Capitan. He'd already done that. He conquered his mind. He was able to banish all doubt, all fear, all anxiety, know that he was one of the best climbers in the world, and do what he could do. And I consider it one of the most incredible mental athletic feats I've ever seen. And so great athletes like Alex, they put in hours and hours and hours climbing or putting or shooting free throws or in the batting cage, right? But again, it's really what you can bring to that moment mentally. And so Thomas, in the book, The Blue Team, the Lord really gets his attention and gives him, throws him a curveball that he can't hit, but it's the best thing for him. Because now he can really play the game out of love. He can play the game because he's not trying to be the next Larry Bird. He can play the game because he knows it's a gift, and he can do it really well. And he's going to share that gift. So it is... It's about 2/3 of the way through the season. And he's done some dumb things, as 18-year-old kids do. But he's going to get back in the game. And so it's a home game. It's really tight competitions against a really good team. And he hasn't been in the game in a while. So he's been sitting on the bench, which he's not used to. And so then the coach finally, tells him to go in the game. And he kind of does a double take, like, oh, I get to get back in. He was out of the doghouse. Okay, so this is Thomas. On my way to the scores table to check in, a flood of doubts came out of nowhere. Could I really play without an ego, without a chip on my shoulder? Would my competitive fire still be there? I was a shooter. Shooters need to have a crazy amount of confidence. Would I still have enough? I got back into our huddle where Coach Ross, he's the head coach, was talking about our defense. Jim, now I gotta explain Jim. Jim is the senior, and Jim, all these characters, you can point back to some of my teammates. Jim is really Joe Dooley, who was the head coach at East Carolina, as one of my teammates. But they're all symbolic of people that we have in our life. Jim was symbolic of the guy that was more mature. He was the senior. He was the brilliant leader. He was selfless. Okay, the older brother. Jim still wore that look that he gave me, intense and determined. Had I ever seen Jim put his ego, his glory, above that of the team? Of course not. But he was an amazing player. My ego wasn't going to help me or anybody. I didn't need it to stroke my competitive fire. The love of the game would. The love of competition, the love of using my God-given talents to do something great. The fire would still be there. But without my old ego calling the shots, it just wouldn't burn me or anyone else. So he gets into the game. And again, Thomas is a shooter. And he's not just a one-trick pony, but he's a really good shooter. So he gets in there and he's doing all the little things that another teammate of his, a senior, Matt, does. He's setting screens. He's playing defense. And he doesn't take any shots. But late in the game, it's a close game. Okay, Jim has the ball. And it is tied, I believe, yes. There's a lot of games in here, so I got to remember which game this is. Jim dribbled between his legs. It was 4 seconds, so 4 seconds left. Jim dribbled between his legs, changed directions. Hands swatted at the ball, shouting voices filled the air. For some inexplicable reason, my defender left me to help out on Jim. I ran to an open spot behind the three-point line, and Jim saw me. That's what shooters do. We go to the open spot. And Jim saw me, 3 seconds. Jim delivered the ball right on the money, 2 seconds. My hands and arms were already in the proper position, cocked and ready to shoot. I felt the dimpled leather, and my fingertips reached for the seams. Shooting a basketball is one of the most beautiful things in the world. I'd done it a million times. I was good at it, and right now, my team needed this shot to go in. 1 second. I let fly my first shot of the night just before the buzzer sounded. Swish. My three-pointer tied the game and sent it into overtime. You'll have to read it to see what happens in overtime. But the point is, though, again, it's, I brought up John Wooden earlier, and if you remember John Wooden, or if you've ever heard of John Wooden's pyramid of success, he defined success as, and I'm going to paraphrase, having the peace of mind to know that you have given your best to be your best. And if that rings a bell to you, I'll tell you the bell it rings to me is Philippians 4, 6, and 7, having the peace of mind, right, that you can ask for anything and the Lord will give it to you. And don't worry. And I know I've paraphrased both of those. Final story. Why do I tell this story? Why did I write the Blue Team? You remember this guy, Jim Valvano? So Jim Valvano was the head coach for North Carolina State when they won the national championship in 1983. It was a huge upset. Thurl Bailey, the guy that I called some games with, he was on that team. And this is at the ESPYs in 1993. And it was on my birthday, March 3rd. I was 25. And he was about 6 weeks away from dying from cancer. And it's a famous speech. They still have the ESPY Awards. Every year, ESPN raises money for cancer research. Okay, so in this speech, he gives his famous "Don't give up, don't ever give up" quote. And in the early 90s, when I'm trying to be a coach, I'm trying to write a book. Who's going to read my book? Who's going to hire me as a coach? I took a big black marker and I write "Don't give up, don't ever give up" on a sheet of paper, and I put it up on the wall in my bedroom. And I looked at it for years, and it was a source of motivation for me. And I remember thinking, I want to have the same kind of impact that Coach Valvano had. I don't want to write a book about a bunch of funny anecdotes. I want to have an impact that him and so many other coaches like him have. Well, I've gone back and watched his speech a number of times. He also said something else too. He said, every day, you should do 3 things. Every day, if you do these 3 things, you'll have a full life. You should laugh. You should think. And you should have your emotions move the tears. Every day. You should laugh, you should think, and you should cry. If you do all those 3 things, that's a full day. Fast forward about 25 years or so, and unfortunately, my PowerPoint cuts off the whole quote. But this is my head coach, Mike Jarvis. So Mike Jarvis became my head coach my senior year at GW, went on to St. John's, almost made the Final Four. He was a very successful college coach, was on TV for quite a bit after that. I sent him the Blue Team before I published it, and I said, would you take a look at this and maybe give me a blurb or a positive review. And he loved it. And he said, playing off of what Jim Valvano said, he said, "I laughed, I cried, and I cheered as the story behind the story unfolded." And Coach Jarvis became a Christian later on in his life as well. So he really got both ends of the story. He got the basketball side and he got the faith-based side as well. So the best writing advice I was ever given was by an old English professor, and she said, "Write what you know." Well, I know who my greatest adversary is. It's my own mind, and I know that I've been saved from that. And I know that we all have a story to tell. And I encourage each and every one of you to tell your story. And I thank you for coming on this beautiful Friday evening to listen to my story. So that's it, but I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
So how did you actually find people to help you write the book, get it published, book tours
Sure.
from here to where you are today?
Yeah.
What steps did you have to take?
Well, first of all, one of the best decisions I made was I hired an editor, and she was fantastic. And it was just kind of serendipity. She worked at the chiropractor's office where we go to. And she's a believer. She knows nothing about basketball, but she's a believer. She's a great writer and a fantastic editor. So she was phenomenal. It went from, I've wanted to write this book for years, to I'm going to do this. And she was wonderful. I paid her hourly. It's amazing. And she still helps me with my writing because I am working on the sequel. I self-published. I did not want to try and go the route of, kind of knocking on doors and getting my head beat in over and over and over again, trying to find an agent and then get a publishing house and get it published. Because having been in the sports broadcasting world, I kind of had one foot in the entertainment industry and I saw how it worked. I thought, I don't want anybody trying to dilute my message. I want to tell the story I want to tell. So self-publishing is great, and then it makes it very easy to publish a book. The downside of self-publishing is anybody can do it. So there's about 1,000 books a day, I think is the last figure I heard, that are published a day. So how do you get it heard? How do you get it seen? So I've been doing talks like this. I go to a lot of service clubs, Rotary, Lions, Kiwanis, and it's a lot of hard work, really. I love the writing. I don't really love the marketing. But you can do it. Yeah. So you got to get help, though. I had an excellent team help me. You can't do it on your own.
Who was the rest of the team?
Well, the other part would have been Rick, my old TV broadcasting producer. There was an encouragement who really directed me in the right direction. And then the editor is probably really those two. But I've also had people help with the marketing once it was published. So yeah, it's a small team, but they're all important. Who was the publisher? No? Lulu Publishing is who I used. Yeah. Yep. So has anybody been following March Madness? Anybody here like basketball? Okay, do you remember St. Peter's? The Cinderella story that just lost in the Elite Eight? Okay, so everybody loves St. Peter's, right? So does anybody know where St. Peter's is from? Jersey City. Jersey City, New Jersey. So I grew up in New Jersey. And I played in an all-star game in Jersey City. Here's my experience with Jersey City. So we played this game. It was the Northern New Jersey All-Stars versus the Jersey City All-Stars. And Jersey City is the biggest city in New Jersey. It's like 200,000 people. So after the game, the players and the families are on the court just milling about, having fun. And then all of a sudden, everybody comes rushing through the big doors like you have back there. Gasps and screams. And nobody knows what's going on. Well, in the hallway outside, somebody had pulled a knife on somebody else. And then the guy took off. That's my experience with New Jersey, and Jersey City, sorry. So St. Peter's is the darling, but it's like, oh my gosh. Their head coach took another job, actually, by the way. He already got the job at Seton Hall.
So when it turned from nonfiction to fiction,
Yep.
did the protagonist's basketball skills improve?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Again, that's where it became a novel, yeah. I mean, I did a lot of this in my college career. I did have a couple good games. But, yeah, Red Auerbach was right. I could shoot and do nothing else. And really, when I look back on it, I'm glad I waited. I'm glad it really wasn't good until it was the story that I was meant to tell. And then when I got to tell that story, it was ready. And So whether or not it goes out to be a bestseller and reaches millions, because it's not there yet, it's impacted lives, and I'm very humble and thankful for that it had a positive impact on those who've read it.
How did you find an editor?
Again, I just stumbled across her. I knew her, but I had no idea she did this. And so the chiropractors are still good friends of ours, and they knew I was writing this book, and they said, Peter, do you know that Jamie's an editor? I had no idea. Jamie's an editor. And so we probably worked together 2 years till it was ready to go. And it was already probably 80% written, just not written that well. And she did a wonderful job of, not saying change it, but just, have you thought about this? Or great job here. Oh, you lost me here. You need that. You need another set of eyes. I've written a memoir. I have not published it, but I've probably sent it off to a dozen people now. Because everybody has a different perspective. Not that you need to take their perspective, but it's helpful because they may see things that you just miss. That you're glad that they saw it before it gets out there.
When did you publish this?
I published it in 2016, and then I kind of, again, one of the beauties of self-publishing is if you need to go back and change something, you can. There were a lot of little clerical errors. So I kind of relaunched it in 2018. I changed the cover, a sentence here, a word there. That's about all I really changed. So yeah, so I kind of consider it 2018.
How did you come up with the name?
I was waiting for that question.
Oh.
Okay. So, do you know who's playing in the semifinals tomorrow, the Final Four? What's the big game? Everybody know who Coach K is, right? Mike Krzyzewski? Okay, this could be his final game. Sorry, Kathleen, you don't know this. Okay, Coach
I
Krzyzewski.
know a little bit about basketball,
Okay.
but I'm not following this.
So, two of the most iconic programs in the country are North Carolina and Duke. They're playing tomorrow. It is a matchup in heaven because they've been playing against each other in the ACC since the 50s, and they've never met, ever, in the NCAA tournament. Did you know that? They've never met. They're going to meet tomorrow, and Coach K is retiring. It is like a TV broadcaster's dream. And he could lose to his arch rival, or he could win and go to the finals. Oh my God, what a great story. Okay, so my college coach before Mike Jarvis was a guy named John Kuster. He played North Carolina. Again, the Tar Heels, the arch nemesis for Duke. And their famous coach was a guy named Dean Smith. And Dean Smith was the Coach K before Coach K. He coached from the 60s all the way to the 90s. Again, a legend. And all these players that went on to the pros and then became really good coaches, who played for Dean, wanted to do everything like Dean did. So it's a very simple explanation. In practice, you want to be able to scrimmage and do drills. So in Carolina, they had the powder blue or Carolina blue, and then you would have a reversible jersey. So you'd have white with like the blue lettering. And then you reverse it out, it's blue with white lettering. And that's how you have your scrimmages or you do your drills. So my coach at GW, we were blue and white and gold, and he wanted to do everything Dean Smith way. So if you were on the white team, white jersey, blue lettering, you were a starter. You were the first team. If you were on the blue team, you're the scrubs, you're the bench warmers, and it became your identity. If you were late for practice, missed a class, Kathleen, go blue. If you been playing really well in practice, Tom, go white. It was a carrot or a stick to motivate you to play harder, but it also became an identity. The blue teamers would sit next to each other on the bench or on the bus or in the pregame meal. The white teamers would hang out together after the game. They'd go celebrate. The blue teamers would be embarrassed because they didn't get to play. And if you're both on the same team, whether it's Duke, North Carolina, or lowly George Washington University, you want everybody on the same team, not having their identity wrapped up in if they're a starter or not. So that's kind of where it came from, the idea that you would have your identity wrapped up into something else other than who you really are. So that's where the blue team came from.
I guess I'll have to learn more about basketball.
You will when you read it. I have a friend of mine, she's like, Peter, I knew nothing about basketball, but now I know a little bit about basketball.
Did you have any idea about when the sequel will come out?
The funny thing is, Jamie, my editor, is going on maternity leave in about a week, so I did get her the first draft. But I was hoping to get it done this year, but she's going to be on maternity leave till August. And I mean, I'm kind of a grinder. This is my first novel. I wrote it 5 times probably. I just kept writing and writing and writing and writing. It's about 108,000 words. I probably cut 200,000 words. I have like the Blue Team 2 on my computer that never saw the light of day. So I just keep writing and writing and writing. And I won't have to do that much with the sequel, but that's the way I write. I I just keep going.
Did you write every day or once in a while as time got closer to the?
No, you should, and I didn't. But when I really got serious, when I got down to, okay, I'm going to get it done this year, it was on my head, top of mind, even though I have another job, every day. It was the one thing I wanted to work on every day. And so at that point, yeah, I got to it every day. But again, it took 20 years. Well, I didn't write for 20 years. It was really just the last 2 or 3 that was fairly serious to, we got to get it done. You know.
Do you still have another job?
I do. I sell real estate, yeah. So I used to be a sports broadcaster. The other funny story about, it's not funny, I guess it's funny, with broadcasting is I didn't get my contract renewed because the CEO of the company I worked for didn't like the sound of my voice. So I didn't get my contract renewed. So I thought, well, you know, I was arrogant at the time. I'll wait for ESPN to call. Well, they didn't call for 8 years. So my TV career did this, and I got into real estate, and that's what I still do, which provided the time for me to write as well. And Lord knows, it's what I needed.
I'm retired. All I've got is time.
You've got plenty of time, to write. And I do have copies in the back, if you would like one. So
You said it's your first novel. Have you written other?
I have a memoir that's all done,
Right.
and I am looking for an agent on that one. If I can't find one, I'll self-publish. I kind of, well, I'm a better writer, which you would want to be, right? You'd hope. I mean, as you keep writing, you get better. I would like to see if I can get a broader audience. And if I can't, it's okay. I'll self-publish. But that one's done. That's what I did during COVID. 4 to 5 hours a day, just spilled out of me. Couldn't stop, couldn't move my fingers fast enough.
So where are you looking for an agent for the memoir? How do you go about looking?
You just Google it, you just find agents, and I've sent off at least 50 query letters. And there are websites to write the proper query letter. Oh my gosh, right? And I've probably got 12 rejections. But they all say the same thing, like, listen, don't get discouraged. It's very subjective. I'm not saying your book is bad, it's just that this is not for me. Okay. I mean, Chicken Soup for the Soul, right? He got rejected by, 30 people. Mitch Albom was a great sports writer. He wrote Tuesdays with Morrie, a great book, I've read it twice. Same thing, he got rejected over and over again. His publisher only printed enough books to get 200 copies in each state, thinking, yeah, we'll put this out there. It was sold out within like a month. And now it's sold, millions.
So when you do send out query letters, do you select agents that are
Yep.
with particular interest in what you're writing?
Yeah, so you look them up. I mean, it takes time. The agent will say, I don't do memoir. I don't do Christian. I'm not going to send it to you then. I'm not going to waste my time. Or I'm not taking inquiries right now because they're too busy. So you got to find the needle in the haystack, really. Haven't found him or her yet.
You will.
Yeah, it'll happen. Well, thank you again for coming. I'm happy to sign a copy if you'd like one, and I can hang around and ask more questions. But for the recording, I would say thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah.